Hello, it's Tom Donald from the London Contemporary School of Piano. Today I'm going to show you 3 powerful ways to develop your piano scales practice. And what I see with so many of my students is they struggle often with their scales, and for numerous reasons. What I'm looking to do in this video is I want to show you 3 progressive scale practice techniques to help you elevate your scale practice and understand your scales at the piano much better. So what we're going to start with tip 1. And we also have another video on scales on our YouTube channel, which is called 8 Things I Wish I Knew About Piano. And you'll get some really good tips about scales on that video as well. So you can cross-reference between those 2 videos. And if you're a fan of our work at the London Contemporary School of Piano, you should head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, to get our free resources kit. That is a great accompaniment to these videos. So on to tip number 1. The first tip and today I want to just show you the low-hanging fruit, the things that you just might not have thought of before with your scales that are holding you back. And so this first tip is know your tones and semitones. So what is a tone and a semitone? Well, a tone is a whole note, you could call it, like a C to a D is a tone. A G to an A is a tone, or an A flat to a B flat. That's a tone as well. And it's good to sing tones on the piano as well, just to get a really good understanding for the distance between the notes. It might seem obvious, but singing these intervals really helps. La, just to get the feeling of those 2 notes being put together. Now that's a tone. Now a semitone is a smaller interval. It's half a tone. So for instance, a C to a C sharp, that's a semitone. A D to a D sharp, that's a semitone. But so is also an E to an F, because they're the nearest available notes. Or a B to a C, that's a semitone as well. So they're even closer than, let's say, a tone, a full tone, which let's say would be an E to an F sharp. That's a full tone, while an E to an F, that's a semitone. So major scales, and we really want to get good at our major scales first before we start messing with the other scales. Major scales consist of tones and semitones in this particular order. Have a look at C major, a scale you probably already know. Have a look at the tones and the semitones in C major. You've got tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So you have the semitones from the 3rd to the 4th note and to the 7th to the 8th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes in the octave, and you have the semitone from the 3rd to the 4th, and the semitone from the 7th to the 8th, and the rest are tones. Now, this is a universal pattern. All of our major scales use exactly that pattern. So you can calculate that starting on any note on the piano. So I do it in C major again. Semitone, tone, tone, semitone. So let's get a D flat. And let's calculate the same pattern of tones and semitones on a D flat, and I'll get a D flat major scale. Tone, 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 semitone, then the semitone at the end. Tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So it doesn't matter what note I start on, that very same pattern is always occurring on a major scale. It's a universal pattern. So you could start by just grouping your scales together in easy groups like C, F, and G major, and applying that pattern. G major, that's another one. And just start by practicing 1 octave. Even if you can play certain scales you know well in 2 or 4 octaves, the reason why I'm going to ask you just to do 1 octave is I want you to get good at all of your scales and know them all. So just by focusing on starting on an octave first, rather than getting stuck practicing D major on 4 octaves for hours on end and getting good at that and then not knowing what an A flat major scale is. So many of you learn 4 or 5 scales and then that's it. You sort of leave it there, you go, I'll learn the rest later, and it never happens. So what we're trying to do is put all of our scales together in one practice session. So perhaps you might need a few weeks to just get all of your tones and semitones organized, starting on all of the keys. And then this is a really good way to practice all of your scales in one go. I call it a super scale. All of the scales in one go. And it's like this: C major, D flat major, D major, E flat major, E major, F major, G flat major, G major, A flat major, A major, B flat major, B major, C major. We've done all 12 scales. So in a whole practice run, I've played all of the scales. Now that might take you a while to get up to that, but that's what you're wanting to be aiming to do. Now, on the topic of fingering, and I know I'm just talking about the right hand, because you should do the same thing in the left hand as well, exactly the same thing. But I just want to get this principle over to you so you understand. You also don't want to think of all your scales as having all separate different fingerings. And, you know, there's these scale books that are like this thick, you know, with all of the keys in it, with all of these different fingerings in it, and it's confusing and it's all numbers written everywhere, and it just doesn't stick. It's just not the way to see it, because the piano is right in front of us and we want to look at this thing. So for instance, if a scale, there are universal patterns in all of our scales. So what if I was to tell you our scales really only have one or two fingerings, in the sense that there are patterns that our fingers work towards. So for instance, if I look at all of the scales in the right hand, my thumb always goes on C and F if there's a C and F in that scale. Have a look at this. C major. Right, my thumb went on C and F. So my thumb is like my guiding compass here. So the fact I know that my thumb goes on C and F, I'm just working around that. Now, if I play a D flat major scale, I don't want to put my thumb up on a black key, because that's a little awkward for a scale. So I'll start on my index finger, and my thumb goes on F and C, C and F, right? So it's just like a C major scale. My thumb goes on the same notes, C and F. And I just organize my fingering around that. Then I've got E flat major scale. Notice the same pattern occurs. My thumb is on C and F again. It's amazing how we have these universal finger patterns. A flat major, my thumb goes on C and F. Now the pattern is slightly different in the left hand, because the left hand is a mirror of the right hand. So it's like a reverse of what the right hand is doing, but the same logic applies. So you just want to work out what finger you need to start on and work out where your thumb should go. And of course you can use a scale book to help you, or a scale guide, but you actually want to teach your fingers how to think for themselves. And by me putting all the scales together in one practice session, it automatically makes me organize my fingering. See, I connect D flat to the C major because it's the next scale, just going in semitones. This is so much quicker than just looking at a circle of fifths diagram. I have nothing against the circle of fifths. It's the most amazing thing. It is the science behind our scales. But the science behind the scales is not going to train your fingers. And that's the reality. So that's the second tip, is think of where the thumb goes and learn where the finger starts. So I'll just take you through a jog through the left hand using the same logic. We're going to start on the fifth finger for the left hand, C major, thumb on G, D flat major starting on the third finger, thumb on F and C, fifth finger D major, thumb on D and A, third finger E flat major, thumb on G and D, and you can see that they're the patterns you want to look out for. So watch my fingers and take note of which finger I'm starting on and where my thumb is going. And that's how you work out your fingering. So let's do the left hand. By the way, for B major, we start with the fourth finger. Because if we start with the fifth finger, and if you get it wrong, this is really useful because then it helps you make those adjustments. See, if I started with the fifth finger, I'd end up with that uncomfortable feeling of the thumb being up there. So I then adjust to start on my ring finger, put my fourth finger over, and my thumb is landing on the B and the E. So that's a really effective way to practice our scales and our fingering. The third point, minor scales. This gets everybody, so I want to clear this up once and for all. Now, I know that we have relative minor and relative major scales. However, relative minor and relative major scales is a theoretical concept, and it's a very important bit of theory. It's an important bit of theory in classical music, for instance. If Mozart's in C major and wants to go to a nice subtle relative minor, he'll go down 2 notes to A minor, which is the relative minor. And it's also an important thing to know for key signatures, that a D major and a B minor scale, for instance, share the same key signature. However, thinking about relative minors won't improve your minor scale playing. What will is understanding the direct relationship of major and minor. So I'm going to promote another way of you to think about your minor scales, and I call this parallel minor. So it's going from major to the parallel minor, as in C major to C minor, D flat major to C sharp minor, D major to D minor, because you get that sudden change and you really can feel the difference. So the other thing that's confusing about minor, and it gets absolutely everybody, minor is very changeable. There are different types of minor scales. There's not just one type of minor scale. Now, major scales on the piano are like the king of scales. The piano is really organized around the appearance of major scales, and they cannot really be changed without completely turning it into something different, like a mode. However, minor scales are more interchangeable. So I'm going to show you 2 types of minor scales just to get you started. And I'm going to firstly show you harmonic minor. So an easy way to find a harmonic minor scale is to flatten the 3rd and the 6th note of the major scale. So if I play C major and I think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, I'm now going to flatten the 3rd note and flatten the 6th note. And I get this. Flatten 3rd, flatten 6th. So I've kept all the other notes exactly the same, but I've just flattened the 3rd and the 6th. And I can do that in any key. What about D minor? Flatten the... So I'll do D major first. Now flatten the 3rd and the 6th note. And I get a completely different sound. I get that dramatic sound of harmonic minor. However, composers also like to use the natural minor scale, and that's when you flatten the 7th as well. So you get, let's just play C major. Now I'm going to flatten the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th note. And that's the natural minor scale. Let me demonstrate how classical composers use natural minor scales and harmonic minor scales. They will usually marry the 2 together in a melody to give themselves options. What about Mozart's iconic 40th Symphony? If I play the melody in C minor, I get this. So he's going down on the natural minor with the flattened 7th. And then in the next phrase, he goes down on the harmonic minor. So he does a bit of both because it creates colour and interest in the music. Now imagine if he just did one. What would happen if he just played harmonic minor on that melody? It sounds like Spanish flamenco now, or it sounds like Arabic music. But folk music tends to just be more centered on one type of minor scale, while classical music tends to use a mixture of both. So what if he just used the natural minor? And in natural minor, we hear a lot in pop music. In pop music, we tend to hear more natural minor than harmonic minor, to get those sort of sounds and textures. So the natural minor is flat and 3, flat and 6, flat and 7. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I hope it's cleared a few things up with your scale practice. And just remember to try and put as many scales together and group them in your practice as possible. If you need more help from us, our team at the London Contemporary School of Piano, we are education specialists. We're not just professional musicians who play and gig and perform concerts. We're actually trained pedagogical music specialists. And that means that when we encounter any of our students from all over the world, we can assess your learning style and we can build a learning program that is completely compatible with your learning style. So it takes a lot of the friction out of the difficulties with piano and makes that path to improvement more easier. Not that piano is easy, but it makes it more effortless, because understanding the way you learn and you see scales and chords and notes and tailoring a teaching method that fits that. And it's a very rare thing to come across a group of teachers that have training and specialty in this area. Our recruitment process of finding these types of teachers is extremely vigorous because, put it quite frankly, you could be the best concert pianist in the world. It doesn't mean you're going to know how to explain these concepts to another student. It's just like when you jump in a car and drive. Do you remember how to break those components of starting up an engine and putting your foot on the right accelerator and the clutch box and all of that? You're not going to know what to do if you do it by autopilot. You're never going to know how to explain that to somebody else. And that's why teaching is so important. It's breaking things down in a way where you can understand it that suits your learning style and learning needs. And if you find our videos helpful, it's because some of it might be speaking to your learning style. It's not that there's one way to learn anything on piano. There's many, many ways, and we're all students of music in that sense. So you can always visit our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, if you'd like an assessment of how we can help you, and make sure that you become the best musician you can become. I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.